It all started on a Wednesday. The skies above Earth shimmered for just a second, like heat rising off the asphalt on a scorching summer afternoon. If anyone had been paying close attention, they might have noticed this ripple in the atmosphere. But life on Earth was busy as always. Commuters rushing to work, parents herding children to school, travelers in crowded airports checking their phones with bleary eyes. Nobody expected the world to change that morning. Then came a strange thunder, echoing not from clouds, but from a force breaking through dimensions. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. A silent presence had taken position in the skies above every major city and continent, as if an entire fleet had just stepped into existence all at once. Over the next few hours, countless eyes turned to the heavens in shock and awe. News helicopters buzzed around towering silhouettes, trying to capture footage from every angle. People gathered in open spaces, pointing phones upward, streaming on social media platforms, tagging friends, and narrating the bizarre phenomenon to anyone who would listen. Scientists at observatories scrambled to adjust their instruments, searching for readings that might explain these dark monoliths overhead. Governments convened emergency sessions, intelligence agencies launched frantic inquiries, and militaries across the globe placed their forces on high alert. Ordinary citizens found themselves torn between excitement and dread. First contact was no longer science fiction. Yet for all the chatter, the black ships hovering above the cities emitted no sound, no signal. They simply hung there, like elongated shadows against the clouds. Many thought the visitors were biding their time before revealing themselves. Perhaps they were studying us, scanning our defenses, or learning our languages. Perhaps a historic greeting was about to unfold, some cosmic handshake bridging species from across the galaxy. The world waited on a razor's edge of anticipation, half fearful of a devastating war, half dreaming of an interstellar exchange of knowledge and culture. Then, at exactly 1400 hours Universal Time Coordinated, the first cities blinked out. No warning sirens blared. No lasers sliced the air. No bombs fell from those silent ships. In one unimaginable moment, entire metropolitan areas vanished without a trace. New York's skyline, Beijing's crowded avenues, Lagos's sprawling neighborhoods, gone in the space of a breath. No explosion, no fire, not even rubble. Just empty land where once there had been life. Satellite feeds that tried to capture this event cut to static. Radio transmissions from those areas ceased mid-sentence. The entire world watched, horror-struck, as beloved cities and the millions who lived in them were seemingly erased from existence. Within minutes, governments worldwide triggered emergency protocols. Every military power scrambled jets, launched missiles, and fired off electromagnetic pulses intended to disrupt whatever technology the visitors possessed. Warheads soared into the sky, contrails crisscrossing like frantic brushstrokes. But made no difference. The ordnance disintegrated before even reaching the black surfaces. Drones deployed for observation fared no better. They simply vaporized on contact, leaving nothing but static on the control screens. It was like trying to fight a nightmare with cardboard swords. Humanity had warred among itself for centuries, invested in advanced weaponry, and even planned for extraterrestrial threats in hypothetical scenarios. But none of that mattered now. 12 hours later, a second wave arrived. This time, no cities disappeared. Instead, sleek, insect-like machines descended through the air. Each one was the size of a large truck, with a tapered body and multiple articulated limbs that moved with eerie precision. They made no sound as they touched down on roads, in parks, and atop buildings. Streetlights flickered in their wake. People who were still dazed from the first attack watched, transfixed and terrified. Nobody could predict their next move, and the machines gave no sign they recognized humanity at all. They simply fanned out, occupying spaces and establishing some invisible perimeter. That's when the first sparks of resistance began. It wasn't a grand, organized uprising. It started with small, frantic acts of courage or rage. A family, cornered in what used to be a quiet suburb of Manchester, decided they would fight rather than wait to be vaporized. Rigging together an improvised explosive from household chemicals, they hurled it under the belly of one of those insect-like machines. Miraculously, The device detonated at just the right angle, disabling the machine's lower limbs. The footage spread across social networks faster than governments could react, and it ignited a small ember of hope across the surviving corners of the planet. People realized that maybe these visitors, unstoppable as they seemed, could be harmed, if only by chance. Emboldened by that lucky strike, ragtag militias began to form. Some comprised veterans who had witnessed the futility of official military action. Others were young hackers who believed they could crack the aliens' communications if they tried hard enough. Civilians who had lost everything, homes, cities, loved ones, channeled their desperation into smuggling supplies and establishing communications networks. Old radio frequencies were repurposed to coordinate small battalions. Underground bunkers became makeshift command centers. Every day, more people found ways to help, whether by spreading intelligence or modifying household tools into weapons. Fighting back, even hopelessly, felt better than just waiting to die. That on the second day of this invasion, people began referring to the silent aggressors as the Hollow. The name came from the unsettling emptiness they brought wherever they went. The insect-like drones emitted no whir of machinery, and the towering ships floated with a haunting stillness that defied even the wind. It was like staring at silhouettes cut out from the fabric of reality itself. Soldiers reported no heat signatures, no electromagnetic fields, no radiation. Civilians described feeling that these objects weren't truly there, but rather holes in the world where something else showed through. Despite the crushing losses, the resistance took form in clandestine labs and safe houses. Engineers dismantled every piece of alien wreckage they could scavenge, though most fragments disintegrated quickly, leaving behind a strange organic residue that defied chemical analysis. Biologists, working by flashlight in abandoned hospitals, tried to decode its properties. Hackers with old laptops cloistered in basements tried to bypass alien encryption, hoping to find anything resembling a command sequence. Artists volunteer their skills to make camouflage patterns or to craft decoy drones that might confuse the invaders. More and more, humanity's collective ingenuity came to the fore, proving that in desperation, creativity can sometimes flourish. Then came day 3. Almost as though orchestrated by some cosmic timer, something changed overnight. At dawn, every satellite feed on Earth went dark. Not jammed, not destroyed, simply disconnected, as if an invisible hand had plucked them from the sky. Communication centers on the ground tried to reboot systems, recalibrate signals, but it was useless. The satellites were still in orbit, but their link to Earth had vanished. That alone was enough to sow panic, but the day had barely begun. Shortly afterward, entire power grids began to fail in a wave that swept across continents. At first, some thought it was sabotage by the Hollow, but inspection teams that rushed to power stations found no sabotage, no damage. They found empty control rooms, still warm coffee mugs abandoned on tables, and half-eaten sandwiches sitting under blinking fluorescent lights. Workers had disappeared mid-routine, leaving behind only eerily silent corridors. This pattern repeated in city after city, as though people were plucked from their stations in mid-sentence. In one subterranean hydroelectric plant, the personal devices of the workers continued to show active signals, but the owners were nowhere to be found. Panic spread in whispers and rumors. Families dialed phone numbers that rang endlessly with no answer. Entire emergency crews simply went off the grid with no explanation. Those who remained holed up in bunkers or hidden communities struggled to maintain some semblance of organization. The world felt like it was melting away. In some places, lines of cars were found abandoned on roads, doors ajar, engines running, but no drivers in sight. That afternoon, the Hollow made their first non-destructive move. In the bombed-out ruins of Berlin, a structure began to grow. People who observed from afar said it appeared to sprout from a singularity in the ground, layer by layer, as though each piece was folding out of thin air. It stood taller by the minute, twisting with impossible angles and edges that seemed to shift with the viewer's perspective. Scattered drones that had been wandering the city converged around it, forming a protective ring. No human shelling or rocket barges had any effect on the perimeter. The structure pulsed with an inner light that flickered like a dying star. Leadership among the various resistance cells watched with mounting apprehension. This tower or spire or whatever it was had to be a command hub. They reasoned that it might be controlling the disappearance of humans worldwide. Maybe destroying it would break the hold the Hollow had on Earth. Fueled by the last measure of hope, the battered remains of global military command organized an all-out strike. They called it Operation Eclipse, a concentrated assault by every remaining resistance cell, armed with salvaged alien fragments, improvised explosives, reconfigured missiles, and anything else that might penetrate the unknown defenses, from bunkers under the Alps, from labyrinthine sewers in Eastern Europe, from mountain hideouts in the Rockies. Teams coordinated their assault. Volunteer truck drivers risked direct exposure to ferry supplies and troops across ravaged highways. Technicians welded steel plates onto vehicles to create ad hoc tanks. Students and mechanics used 3D printers to craft lightweight drones loaded with small charges. Everyone knew this mission was either going to fail or be humanity's last stand. Yet they pressed on a convoy of armored vehicles, their surfaces scarred by earlier engagements, roared down what was left of Berlin's main arteries. Clouds of ash swirled around them, remnants of buildings destroyed in prior attacks. Despite the noise, no Hollow forces engaged. It was as if they were being allowed to advance. The tower loomed ahead, shimmering with strange geometry. Exosuit-clad fighters, strapped into industrial loaders turned mechs, trudged forward, bracing for an onslaught of drones. But the drones simply hovered, forming a silent ring around the tower's base. The lead truck got within 10 meters of the perimeter. Soldiers in the back readied rocket launchers, while a small swarm of homemade attack drones accelerated for a final push. Suddenly, every human froze, not from gunfire or energy blasts, but as though someone had pressed a cosmic pause button. Operators monitoring the assault saw their screens go static for a split second, then return with an image of motionless figures standing in mid-stride. No one moved, blinked, or spoke. Their hearts seemed to have stopped. Tanks ground to a halt, drones spiraled down and crashed, and the entire front line became a tableau of suspended animation. Command centers erupted in confusion. Technicians shouted into radios, but the open channels transmitted only static. Desperate attempts to reboot systems failed. No heartbeat monitors, no life signs, just emptiness. And then, amidst the panic, something else broke through, an unexplainable signal, not carried by radio waves or digital packets, but directly into the minds of those who were still conscious elsewhere. It felt like thousands of overlapping voices, all trying to speak at once, forming a sea of half-formed sentences, shards of emotion, bursts of color. Slowly, these fragments coalesced into a single narrative. The message, if it could be called that, was not from Earth, nor was it from any known broadcasting station. That IT came from those who had just been frozen at the tower's perimeter. Their consciousnesses, pulled free from their bodies, were now united in a single psychic channel. Through this, the truth about the Hollow emerged. They had not come as conquerors in the traditional sense. They were not interested in trade, diplomacy, or even violence for the sake of power. They were collectors of a very particular resource, the intangible complexity that arises when a species develops enough self-awareness and imagination to reshape its own reality. The Hollow called this threshold convergence. As soon as a species approached that convergence, where technology, culture, and collective consciousness neared a tipping point, the Hollow arrived. They didn't negotiate or announce themselves. They simply extracted what they needed. Entire cities, millions of minds, all folded into their living archives. This explained why there was no wreckage, no sign of conflict beyond the initial vanishings. In an instant, the cities weren't destroyed. They were taken. The black ships, it turned out, were more akin to cosmic libraries than war machines. Each one contained enormous layers of stored consciousness, gleaned from countless worlds across the stars. Humanity's resistance had lasted 3 days, not because we made a valiant last stand, but because it took that long for the Hollow to fully red our species. Everything after that was just housekeeping, removing the final pockets of free they hadn't absorbed yet. What the Hollow found within the human mind changed them. Unlike many civilizations before, humans carried an unmatched capacity for imagination. We didn't just create tools or solve problems. We invented entire realities in our art, in our stories, in our music, in our endless flights of fancy. Our histories were riddled with wars and tragedies, but also with myths that transcended violence, hopes that blossomed in the darkest times, and tales that stretched beyond the boundaries of the possible. This breadth of creative spirit was not something the Hollow could process so easily. Our dreams, half-formed fantasies, and refusal to see a single version of reality caused a sort of feedback in their archive. They had encountered countless forms of intelligence across galaxies, but none quite like ours. They stopped. The tower in Berlin collapsed in on itself with barely a murmur, folding in reverse until it vanished like a phantom. The drones that had patrolled so many streets lifted into the sky and dissolved into shimmering static. The massive ships reoriented, rising above the stratosphere without so much as a sonic boom. Onlookers who survived felt an indescribable wave of relief, mingled with confusion. There were no parting words, no final show of force. Just a silent retreat into the heavens. Earth was left battered and fractured. Ruined cities, crippled infrastructures, and a population decimated by disappearances. The end of the invasion should have felt like triumph, yet it was overshadowed by the immense loss. Few celebrations erupted, and those that did were somber affairs. People gathered around fires in broken squares, holding hands and mourning the billions gone. Governments tried to re-establish lines of authority, but the chain of command lay in tatters. The scale of destruction was so vast that, for a time, humanity just focused on basic survival, finding food, water, and shelter in the husks of formerly prosperous towns. In this vacuum of leadership, strange occurrences started happening. People who had vanished abruptly reappeared. It wasn't a mass return. It happened in small clusters. A father reappeared in his living room, disoriented but alive. A missing research team was found in the desert, awakened in their vehicle. These returnees were changed. Some had memories of places that defied logic. Alien landscapes with turquoise suns, cities that stretched into fractal dimensions, orchestras of thousands of unknown instruments. Others came back with knowledge they could not possibly have gained through normal means. One man played an instrument upon returning, claiming it was taught to him by a being made of pure light. A child spoke of the cosmic structure of black holes, explaining it so simply that leading astrophysicists were stunned into silence. It soon became clear that the Hollow had not simply captured minds. They had injected them back into our world, carrying fragments of other civilizations, other realities, gleaned from who knew how many harvested species across time. It was as if the Hollow, faced with the boundless creativity they discovered, had decided to leave behind a seed of possibilities. The vanishings hadn't been purely destructive. They were also a form of sampling, a method of collecting the intangible sparks of thought that humans produced. Within months, pockets of humanity began rebuilding in earnest. It wasn't just about restoring what was lost. It was about creating something new. Engineers, fed by visions of advanced mechanisms, tinkered with designs that rewrote the laws of physics as we knew them. Artists, haunted by memories of alien beauty, poured their experiences onto canvas and into music, igniting a global renaissance. Even agriculture changed. Farmers experimented with new techniques gleaned from glimpses of extraterrestrial ecologies. Some methods failed spectacularly, while others led to the birth of robust crops that could feed entire populations with minimal resources. Old national borders seemed less important now, overshadowed by a collective sense that humanity had to evolve or risk stagnation. What few government structures remained took a back seat to grassroots alliances. People banded together more naturally, united by their shared trauma and the knowledge that we had survived something unimaginable. Curiosity replaced fear as the driving force in society. Expeditions were launched to the vanished cities that had not returned, to see if any clues remained. Sometimes, researchers found cryptic symbols etched into stone or fragments of buildings that had morphed in geometry. Other times, they found only barren land, as though nature itself had erased any evidence of civilization. Each new discovery sparked debate, wonder, and a profound sense that Earth was now only partially ours. One day, a deep-sea exploration drone detected a powerful signal beneath the Pacific Ocean. Scientists rushed to analyze it, expecting it might be a leftover from a submerged naval base or a glitch in the new sensors. But as they triangulated the source, they discovered an impossibly intricate pattern etched into the oceanic crust, miles beneath the surface. Analysis of the pattern took weeks. Teams of mathematicians, linguists, and cryptographers worked around the clock. Eventually, they deciphered the message, or at least the concept behind it. Translated into human terms, it carried a simple meaning. Next time, be ready. Whether this was a challenge, a warning, or an invitation, no one could say for sure. But humanity embraced it. We had survived a cosmic test and emerged irrevocably altered. Our capacity for invention, tempered by tragedy, now carried a new purpose, preparing for whatever the universe might demand of us. Instead of cowering at the memory of the hollow, many found themselves gazing at the night sky with a renewed determination. We couldn't match the hollow's might, but we could nurture the spark that made us unique. The old world had died in those 3 days. Billions were gone, and countless cities lay in ruins. Yet from the rubble rose a humanity more unified than it had ever been. Nations set aside old grievances. Skilled workers traveled across continents to share knowledge. Libraries that had been left standing were filled with volunteers cataloging every scrap of data about the hollow, about the vanishings, about the new technologies people began to develop. A sense of quiet urgency propelled this movement. As though everyone understood, we were on borrowed time. As years turned into decades, small fleets of human spacecraft started venturing beyond Earth's orbit, searching not just for raw materials, but for answers. They carried with them instruments derived from the half-remembered dreams of returned citizens. Some ships even bore the symbolic marks of the Pacific Ocean discovery, reminding crews of the cryptic message to be ready. The void of space, once terrifying in its vast emptiness, now seemed like a frontier for curious explorers who refused to be defined by fear. Still, a silent question lingered over every effort. Would the hollow return? And if they did, would they come as collectors again, or as something else? Rumors circulated that the brief contact had awakened something deep in Earth's collective psyche, that we had begun walking the path toward the convergence the hollow valued. Did that mean we were slowly becoming more like them, or forging a new identity entirely? No one had the answer. In time, stories of the 3-day invasion became legend. Songs were written about the cities that vanished in a single heartbeat, poems about the tower in Berlin that folded in on itself, and epic novels that reimagined the hollow as everything from angels to cosmic librarians. Some doubted the official accounts, theorizing it was all a global hoax or a shared hallucination. Others worshipped the hollow as deities, arguing that they had lifted humanity to a new plane of existence. Most, however, simply carried on, building a future in which creativity and resilience were the cornerstones of survival. Children born in the post-invasion world grew up hearing bedtime stories about unstoppable black ships that retreated when faced with the power of human imagination. They learned of the bravery and tragic losses endured by their parents' generation, and were taught to push boundaries, question everything, and never shrink from the unknown. Education systems evolved, placing equal emphasis on science, art, and the exploration of concepts that once belonged to fantasy and myth. Earth, in its newly scarred and evolving state, became a cradle for inventive spirits. The fractals left behind by the hollow seeped into our technology, our language, our understanding of physics. We no longer believe the laws of reality were set in stone. Eventually, the day came when humanity launched its first faster-than-light vessel, built on principles gleaned from the stray thoughts of returned victims. Named the Dawnbringer, it soared into the cosmic depths, carrying a crew from multiple nations, each member chosen for their imagination as much as for their technical skill. This mission was both a leap of faith and a declaration. We were no longer content to wait and wonder. The Dawnbringer's mission was to seek out the Hollow, to discover where they came from, and to show that we were not an easily forgotten footnote in their archive. But if the Hollow were watching, they made no move to reveal themselves. Perhaps they were curious to see what we would do with the seeds they had planted in our collective consciousness. Perhaps they wanted to see if we would succumb to self-destruction after the trauma they inflicted. Or perhaps, in some inscrutable corner of the universe, they were still trying to make sense of the chaotic tapestry that was human thought in the grand cosmic ledger. The invasion of Earth did not register as a traditional war. Instead, it stood out like an unsolved puzzle, a moment where an advanced, inscrutable force clashed with a species that refused to bow in the expected ways. After all, in less than a week, the Hollow had erased some of our greatest cities, harvested countless minds, and then halted abruptly. This moment was a reminder that the universe operates on scales of time, intelligence, and complexity that defy simple narratives. Yet humans, with their stories, continued to shape how they remembered those events. Over the centuries, every telling added new layers. Sometimes, the Hollow were depicted as tragic figures searching for meaning in the consciousness of others. Sometimes, they were portrayed as cosmic librarians, gathering the sum of universal creativity. And sometimes, they were the ultimate threat, a warning that no matter how strong we become, there may always be a greater power waiting to test us. What remained true in every version was that the Hollow had left a challenge behind. Next time, be ready. Those 4 words, etched into oceanic crust, reverberated through each new generation, reminding people that vigilance and adaptability were essential. While we could not guess when or if they would return, we had no choice but to evolve, to keep pushing the boundaries of knowledge and imagination until the day we encounter them again, or faced another threat entirely. And so, the invasion that began on a Wednesday and ended 3 days later forever altered the course of human destiny. Earth became less a stage for national rivalries and more a laboratory for curious minds. No longer did we see ourselves as bound by old limitations. The line between survival and creation blurred, and we embraced this new perspective with urgency. Even the old scars remained visible. Ruined buildings were left standing in some cities as stark memorials. Monuments bearing the names of vanished millions were placed at the edges of empty craters where once thriving metropolises had been. Survivors and their descendants kept journals of their experiences. The word hollow took on new meanings in different languages, sometimes symbolizing despair, other times standing for raw possibility. In the final tally, the invasion lasted only 3 days in terms of direct confrontation, but its consequences stretched into centuries. Our civilization, once fractured by conflicts, found unity in collective rebirth, channeling mourning into creation and fear into a ceaseless quest for knowledge. If the Hollow had intended to break us, they ended up forging a new humanity that refused to be boxed into neat categories. And so, we came to understand a powerful lesson. Imagination can be as potent a shield as any weapon. In a universe filled with unknown forces, the capacity to dream, to spin tales, to envision wonders yet unrealized, can become the greatest defense of all. It was this quality that made us stand out to the Hollow, and perhaps it was also the quality that saved us, because there, among the ashes of war, arose a simple truth. If you try to corner a species that dreams in 1,000 colors, you might find that your hold on them isn't nearly as strong as you assumed. Sometimes, the only way to handle a force like that is to back away, to watch, and to wait for it to define its own destiny. 3 days was all it took to break the old world, but it would take far longer to unravel the riddle of what broke out of it. And in that gap of understanding lies the essence of humanity's future, a story still unfolding with every new leap of creativity and every foray into the cosmic dark. Let the universe bear witness to what happens when an unstoppable collector meets the one species that refuses to be fully contained. We become not just survivors, but the authors of a story too vast to be archived in any single library. No matter how advanced, no matter how determined to possess us, because we are the storytellers, and our tales will not be silenced.